Well, you know, really, this is the first time I've put both of these instruments together since the beginning of COVID. You know, I had to take some time off. That's when my dad died during that period. So it was really hard for me to be celebrational. So this is the first chance I've had to be able to put both of these drums back together again so I could create some music, and we're just going to see what happens here. And here we go. That was fun. Being the first time I've done this for so long, boy, that really felt good. Really did. I needed to do that. Two amazing drums here. This one is called a dumbek or darabuka. This particular one comes from the craft halls or the workshops of Fethi Cimbuş in Istanbul, Turkey. It's made out of solid copper. Boy, howdy, it's really heavy duty. Had a chance to go there in 2006. I actually saw a man take a block of copper and spin it at a high speed and then shape it into a bowl, take another piece of copper and formed this base and welded it on the inside. Then I had another artist who actually took this thing and took it to town. All the art you see on it, it's all done by hand. No computers, no machines, all hand etchings and paintings and stainings of metal using different chemicals. And there's only a handful of people in the world today that can still do this kind of work. I find it extraordinary. It needs to be celebrated and performed and played as many times as possible because it's pretty darn groovy. It's an amazing drum. Anyway, what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to take a little basic pattern. It's a little piece that I call A Bond Girl by Any Other Name. And that's in honor of my friend Casey Bond, who's a dumbek or darabuka player in New York City and in Long Island. And it's just this nice little simple riff. I'm just going to demonstrate it for you right now. It goes like this. That's the basic framework, and then you build a whole song around it, improvising with different patterns that all fit into this kind of groove. But what I want to demonstrate today is just how you can change the feel, the emotional and the dynamic feel of that little clip just by how you interpret it. Playing at different tempos, accentuating different parts, sometimes playing more rhythm and bluesy, sometimes playing just going absolutely crazy, let's raise the roof. So let's see what this sounds like from a variety of different interpretations. A Bond Girl by Any Other Name. Now that's one way to play it. Let's try this one. There's some differences there. I like taking a lot of the patterns that as I'm learning new patterns, and I try to reinterpret them in different ways without changing a stroke. Which means your sticking, where your dooms, your cas, your techs are mostly always going to be in the same place. Still, how you play it is where all that magic comes from. Because once you know doom, ka, and tech, and you've got it in your sleep, then you can start manipulating. Because when you know a pattern so well that you can play it in your sleep, or so well that you actually get disgusted with it and would rather never hear it again, that's when you finally are starting to understand how to play a pattern. So this little groove here happened by accident. I was just jamming with some friends, and somebody said that my friend Casey was on the phone. So we went and talked to her for a little bit, got off, and then boom, that little set came to my brain, and I started playing it, and I've not been able to stop it. Every time I can play it day in, day out. I cannot play it for a month and pick it up and play it stroke for stroke exactly the way I originally intended it to be. That's how well you need to know your rhythms if you really want to be able to drum with anybody, anytime, and feel comfortable drumming with anybody at any time. Because before you learn what to drum, you should learn how to drum. I really believe that. Now we're going to change to some other instruments. I guess I can move this over here for right now. This lovely little piece of metal here is called a tank drum. A tank drum basically is an old recycled or repurposed propane tank. In other words, this used to run someone's barbecue grill. They cut the sidewalls off, re-welded the top and bottom together. This is where the valve assembly used to be, sticking up like this. But when they cut it off, they made a nice big hole. So now the top becomes the bottom, and the bottom becomes the top. When you have curved metal like this and you start cutting into it, the metal is kind of what they would call sprung, which means you can actually tune it to specific pitches. Just like the keys on a piano, you can tune these little tongue shapes to reflect very specific notes. And I like this particular one because of the arrangement of the four smallest ones in the top, allowing me to play right, left, and be able to play all of them. And then the two middle ones here, and then down here, and the big one at the top, I'm able to play it so that it creates a scale, something like this. Yes, you heard it right. There are notes there that have dissonance to them, but that's intentional because this is basically a hybrid scale that's meant to simulate the tonal sounds that you would hear from different cultures. For example, this particular one is a Kurdish tuning. I don't know the actual name of the Hijaz or the Maqam, I should say, that it was from. That's what people in the Middle East call scales. They call them maqams. And you'll see a lot of people playing these with mallets, and they'll play them up top like this, drumming downwards. Well, I like it with the hole against my belly, and then I play the circle, moving my hand around and around. And when I want to change the circle I'm playing, the tone, I just rotate the drum so that the dominant tongues are on top, so that keeps changing. So you always keep changing what are the dominant tones on top and which ones are on bottom. And then if you have confidence in your rhythm vocabulary, you can go to town. Let me give you some demonstrations here. Let's start off with something simple like a paradiddle. Paradiddle, double paradiddle. I might have thrown in a paradiddle diddle in there as well. But, paradiddle diddles on these are absolutely magical. Or if you just want to feel good, or at least manage emotions that may not necessarily be happy, or those that are happy, but lately I've been having to use this in order to deal with some unhappy things. I try to go to town with it because I'm feeling that energy coming out of the hole against my belly and my core. And so I'm just going to do something right now, and this goes out to my brother and my sister because they're both feeling unwell in Illinois. So anyway. There are multiple names for this instrument. Some people call it a tank drum. Some people call it a steel tongue drum because these cutouts are in the shape like our tongues. There are many, many fine makers of these instruments here in the United States, as well as in other countries around the world. You can go to their websites, and many of them will already have the recordings of the actual scales that they've already produced before. And they will be the actual instruments, not some MIDI'd sampled piece of recording, but the actual instrument itself and what it would sound like with those particular scales. And they usually offer a variety of scales, which is very cool. So I highly recommend it. And there's no sponsorship here for that, but that's pretty amazing stuff. This is called a frame drum. You'll find frame drums throughout most of the cultures of the world, pretty much since people started putting membranes over round hoops. This particular one comes from a company out of New England called Cooperman, and this starts off as a flat piece of wood, and they bend it themselves, do all of the gluing and preparing, and then they mount the head on it. It does have a floating rim on the inside, which is what allows you to use a turning key to tighten these lugs. There's actually a little brass disc inside the wood so that the metal of the tuning lugs will not dig into the floating rim, but it allows really tight adhesion and allows the membrane to be pushed forward, which is how it's tightened. I like the sound of this. I'm going to play it down here for a moment. When I do it down here, I am using this arch here, fitting it on my ankle with my foot resting on top of my other foot. My knees on the inside are actually pushing the inner walls to give it some stability so that I can then have both of my hands free. When you're playing a drum like this, it's nice to be able to have your hands free. Another way to enjoy it is up here on your lap. And I like to hold it, give it a good hug, because then I can have my left hand over here playing. I can also put it on the inside. I'm using my hip and my forearm close to my elbow to hold the drum in place. And since this hand's already on top, it's not going to go anywhere. It's only going to go where you allow it to go, so you can dance with it. Girl piece, but on a different drum. For thousands and thousands and thousands upon thousands of years, people used animal hides until the 50s came, and a guy by the name of Remo Belli, along with DuPont, did some chemistry together and started creating synthetic heads. So I like this because I can take it anywhere, and it doesn't matter what the climate is. I can always tune it to whatever I need it to be, and it's always ready to play. All my really good ceramic drums, they'll never leave my house because I just don't want them ever to break. But this is a really great drum. You can do lots of things with it. There's a lot of people that play it like this. And I do so occasionally, but one thing that most drummers fail to pay attention to is drumming as you get older, because there's a wear and tear factor of drumming when you get older. I'm 65. I'll be 66 in October. I got my first drum when I was 5. It was one of those cardboard drum sets from Sears. And I did what any self-respecting 5-year-old would do. I put my foot right through the bass drum. My parents were not happy. I was not happy. So my dad went out and got me a snare drum without sticks. He wouldn't let me have a pair of sticks until I was old enough to have a teacher to teach me how to use those sticks. So 9 years old came, and a guy by the name of Gary Moore entered my life because he was teaching private lessons at the Veranda's music store in Kankakee, Bradley, Illinois. And he ended up staying a teacher of mine and a mentor of mine pretty much all the way up until he died. At least stick drumming. So wrists can hurt, forearms can hurt, shoulders can hurt, backs can hurt, necks can hurt, bodies can hurt. If you're a trap set drummer, well, you're going to have knees and hip issues and ankle issues. You may have ball of the foot issues, depending upon the dynamics of your physicality when you're playing. So these are some things to pay attention to so that you can listen to your body when it gives you warning signs that you might need to change something or adapt something or take a break or something. Because if you don't, you're going to end up really not being able to play. And how many musicians out there that lost their ability to play that didn't end up eating a gun or something? Sadly, that's happened far too many times because a musician loses the ability to do what they love so much. So my plan has always been to be able to listen to my body so that I can keep doing what I'm doing until, maybe 110 or, 120 be fine. That's cool. I've got no problem with that. But I want to still be hitting on skins, hitting on drum heads, And in order for me to not have my arms constantly vibrating in a very painful manner, I have to do health care. Have to pay attention to hand care, arm care, body care. Anyway, let's play some more drums. That's enough talking about health and all that stuff. So let's play some more Dumbek.
I'm going to take like 15 more minutes, and then do you mind if I ask you some?
You can ask. Why don't you ask questions now?
Right now?
Yeah, ask some questions right now.
Cool. All right. All right, Daveed. So I got some questions for you.
Please.
How long have you been drumming?
I don't know that I would count when I got the drum set from Sears. So from 9 years on, I'm 65. I'll let you guys do that mathematics, but that's how long I've been actually drumming, where I've been taught to do something, not just me goofing around, but actually learning that this is your right hand, this is your left hand, this is an accent, and this is a stroke. Yeah.
Why do you play the drums over other instruments?
Well, for one thing, I had a cousin, I still do actually, he's a really groovy guy, his name is Eddie Zolot, lives down in Texas. He had a band called Zolot and Company, and he was the drummer and the lead vocalist. So I have to tell you, he was my hero early on. Also, I was a fan of the Monkees. And then I got introduced to a band that changed my whole world, and that was called Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And the drumming styles of Carl Palmer just sent me into a whole other orbit. So yeah, started learning that, and then got involved in the drum and bugle corps movement in the United States. And gosh, I've been a fan of drum corps for over 50 years, and I hope I never lose it. But the skills that I learned there, I've been able to implement into these guys.
How can people learn to start drumming and kind of pick up if they haven't done this before?
That's a really good question. The first thing is you need to have a desire to want to play. You don't have to change your lifestyle, unless you feel like it needs to be changed, but that's up to you. But I usually tell my students, the ones that are taking classes from me, that if you can't give yourself 10 minutes a day, then something's wrong with your life. Because only 10 minutes is just a very small fraction of a day, but you could actually do that. You could spend that time doing a drumming meditation or working on a skill set or something else. And then if you happen to, play longer than 10 minutes, well, maybe it might be 10, 20, 30, an hour or 2 or 3. But then it naturally evolved into your world instead of you just having to change it and stop something else. So if you want to drum, first having the desire to drum, acquiring an instrument, nice thing to have, but if you're wanting to learn with sticks, you can always get a pair of sticks and a rubber pad that can go onto a tabletop, if that's what you can afford. There are lots of entry points to drumming. I'm a hand drummer, but I started off as a stick drummer and as an orchestral percussionist, playing all the instruments that you would find in an orchestra or a wind ensemble, from my background anyway.
Can you tell me some of the places you have drummed before?
Ooh, well, let's see here. I've drummed in pretty much of the lower 48, I have been to 46 and performed in 46 states. I've done workshops in most of those, either myself, through my school artist and teaching program or arts and education program that I take into schools, or with the group Turku, Nomads of the Silk Road, which is a Central Asian music ensemble that I've worked with for 20 years. So as far as distance in the United States, that's where I've been, from California to Washington, from Florida all the way up to New Hampshire. I just haven't done Maine or Vermont. And then overseas, I've had the pleasure to perform and teach in the city of Samarkand, which is in the country of Uzbekistan, right in the heart of the Silk Road, Istanbul, Turkey, and a number of different communities in Israel, including Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and several of the moshavs down the spine of the Negev that goes all the way down to Eilat. And that section of the world is called the Arava, which geographically speaking is a giant rift, which means there's a big tear that's about to happen there, I think.
What can you tell me about the way people drum around the world, the differences and the similarities?
Well, the thing that the similarities are going to be that drumming has to do with the creation of instruments. In most of the cultures, they have instruments that use animal hides or other kinds of membraned material, either using your hands or using sticks. The style and music all reflects the cultures that they come from. I mean, if you were to look just look at Asia, for example. Ensembles from Vietnam and China, as well as Japan and Korea. They turn these into huge theatrical art forms, performing art forms that are tied to specific traditions and cultures, whether they are ancient or more modern. I think it's quite extraordinary. You go to places like Ireland and you come to the Appalachians and you've got people playing instruments like this, the bodhran, or taking just 2 rib bones from an animal and playing it so that with your hands, so that the back curvature of the pieces as you manipulate your hands side to side, cause the ribs to smack into each other. And they're called bones. Boy, original names, right? But people have danced to the sounds of those kinds of instruments for millennia. And so pretty much every culture that has walked on this planet has had some sort of percussion instrument as a part of their world, whether it was rocks or drum sets or now these drum machines, and I don't count them as drums because that's electronic stuff and no humans involved.
So I guess my last question for you would be, for someone who's looking to discover more drummers and more significant kinds of drumming, can you give us some recommendations of who to look into and what kind of things to listen to?
Well, I could recommend a lot of different drummers, but I'm going to tell you that that there's an endless search available to you. I do love YouTube as a source of inspiration, of documentation of existing art forms and even soon to be extinct art forms. YouTube just has so much out there that it would be the first place to go. And you know, I would do a survey. I'd pull out a little map and, you know, toss a coin or roll some dice and see what the map coordinates are or something like that. So you could choose a new country and then find out what they did in that country. Because I got to tell you, just look at Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. Latin music and Caribbean music. You know, they all come from they're inspired from original sources where a lot of the early people that came to those land masses that weren't indigenous came from Europe. Or they could have come from Polynesia, because there's evidence of that. And bringing all of that culture and then putting it into a melting pot and stirring it around, we get the sounds that we get today that are quite extraordinary. From everything from salsa and merengue, you know, to samba and all of the other kind of Latin rhythms. And I'm not a student of Latin percussion. I love playing along with people that are good at it. And when somebody gives me a lead on it, I can play the patterns. I just don't have enough background knowledge to give you all the great names and all that. But just from an exciting and dynamic expression within the percussion world, the music of the Caribbean and Central America and even Mexico, you can't go wrong, because this is all about being human. These are all expressions of humanity in its finest form. And so I really believe in that and support that. And I want more and more people to realize that we have so much in common. So let's start off with the rhythms that we know, taking one step at a time, putting one foot in front of the other. Just like if we're going to dance together, we can drum together. And in doing that, we find some peace together.